Living alone after 70 looks completely different behind closed doors than it does during Sunday visits. There are realities, some beautiful, some dangerous, that no one talks about until something goes wrong. I'm sharing this because I've gotten too many calls that started with, "We had no idea." I've done in home care for 15 years, which means I've walked into hundreds of seniors' homes when no one else was around. And I've learned something that most families never see. When I arrive at someone's home for the first time as their caregiver, I can usually tell within 15 minutes how they're really doing, not from what they say. Most seniors are masters at reassuring their families. But from what I observe, the mail piled up on the counter, not just one day's worth, but a week's worth that no one's had the energy to sort through. The same coffee mug sitting in the sink for 3 days. The path they've worn from the bedroom to the bathroom that carefully avoids the area rug they used to step over without thinking. These small details tell me stories their children never hear. I see the difference between how things look on Sunday afternoons when the family visits and how things look on Tuesday mornings when I show up. On Sundays, there's fresh energy. The house is tidied up. They've gotten dressed in something nice. They're ready to put their best face forward because they don't want to worry anyone. But on Tuesdays, I see the reality. The meals that didn't get eaten, the medications that got confused, the nights that were longer and lonelier than anyone realizes. If you're living alone and you've been noticing changes, small things that worry you but seem too minor to mention to your family, I want you to know something right now. You're not imagining it. Those small changes you've noticed, they matter. In my 15 years of caregiving, I've learned that seniors often notice things about themselves long before anyone else does. You know your own body. You know when something feels different. That awareness isn't paranoia, it's wisdom, and it deserves to be taken seriously. And if you're watching this about a parent or loved one, I want to say something to you too. You can't be there every day. That doesn't make you a bad daughter or a bad son. It makes you human. The guilt you're carrying right now, I've seen it in every family I've worked with. You're doing the best you can with what you know. But there are patterns you might be missing simply because you're not there during the regular weekday moments when the truth shows up. Maybe you visited last weekend and something felt off, but you couldn't quite name it. Maybe your mom or dad seemed a little more tired, a little less sharp, a little more hesitant about things that used to be automatic. You left feeling uneasy but told yourself everything was probably fine. I understand that feeling, but I also know what I've learned from being in homes when no one else is watching. The patterns I'm going to share with you aren't meant to scare you. They're meant to give you awareness. Because I've sat with too many families after something went wrong, and the words I hear most often are, "I wish someone had told us to watch for this." So I'm telling you now, not because I want to frighten you, but because I believe you deserve to know what I've learned while there's still time to make different choices. If this is reaching you, I'd appreciate knowing you're here. Go ahead and comment the number 1 below so I know this information is getting to the people who need it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I share insights like this every week from my years of working closely with seniors. Now let me tell you about the realities I've observed that most people don't talk about until it's too late. I cared for a woman I'll call Margaret. I use a different name to protect her privacy. She was 76 when I started working with her. Her husband had passed away about 4 years earlier, and she'd been living alone in the same house they'd shared for decades. Her daughter lived about an hour away and visited every other weekend. And from what the daughter could see, Margaret was doing just fine. She was still sharp, still getting dressed every day, still keeping the house reasonably tidy. But I was there 3 times a week, and I watched something happen that her daughter never saw. Margaret had stopped cooking real meals. When I first started, she'd make herself scrambled eggs in the morning, maybe a sandwich for lunch. But over the course of about 6 months, I noticed the meals getting simpler. The eggs became toast. The toast became crackers and cheese. And some days, when I arrived in the afternoon, I could tell she hadn't eaten much of anything at all. It wasn't that she'd lost her appetite completely. It was that standing at the stove had become exhausting. The effort of pulling out pans, cracking eggs, cleaning up afterward, it all felt like too much when she was cooking just for herself. Her daughter thought she was thriving, But I was there 3 times a week, and I watched her lose 17 pounds in 6 months. When I gently brought it up to her daughter, she was shocked. She had no idea. This is one of the first realities of living alone that no one really talks about. Nutrition declines silently. When you're cooking for one, it starts to feel pointless. The motivation disappears. You tell yourself you'll just have something simple today, and that simple meal becomes the pattern. Before long, you're living on things that require minimal effort. Crackers, cereal, frozen dinners you can microwave. And the weight starts coming off in ways that worry anyone who's watching closely. But families who visit once a week or once a month, they often don't notice until the change is dramatic. Now, let me tell you about another pattern I see all the time. It's about falling, but not the falls themselves. It's the fear of falling that actually creates the danger. I've watched this happen over and over. Someone who lives alone starts to worry about falling, which makes complete sense. They know that if they fall, they might be alone for hours before anyone finds them. So they start compensating. They start shuffling their feet instead of lifting them. They avoid certain rooms in their house. They clutch onto furniture as they move from room to room. And here's what I've learned. The worry about falling actually increases fall risk. I've watched people change how they walk because they're afraid, and that change itself makes them unsteady. The shuffling catches on carpet edges. The furniture clutching means they're always off balance. The room avoiding means their muscles get weaker because they're moving less. It's a cycle that feeds itself, and most families don't see it happening because it develops gradually when no one else is watching. There's one more reality I need to tell you about, and this one affects the mind as much as the body. It's what I call social invisibility. I've worked with seniors who went from having sharp, engaged conversations to giving foggy, one-word responses in just a few months. And the difference wasn't dementia. The difference was that they'd stopped having anyone to talk to. When you live alone, it's entirely possible to go 3, 4, even 5 days without a meaningful conversation with another human being. Maybe you wave to a neighbor, maybe you say thank you to someone at the grocery store. But an actual back and forth conversation where you have to think, respond, engage, that can disappear from your daily life without you even realizing it's gone. And I've watched what that does. The sharpness dulls, the mood drops. The isolation becomes both a cause and an effect of the decline. I'm sharing these patterns not to frighten you, but because I've seen them play out too many times. And the thing is, they're all preventable. They're all things that can be addressed if you know what to watch for. You deserve to understand what's really happening behind the closed doors of living alone. I need to tell you about a man I'll call Robert. He was 81 when I started working with him, but I didn't start working with him by choice. I started because he'd had a fall that changed everything. Robert had been living alone for years, fiercely independent, the kind of person who refused help even when it was offered. His family had tried to talk to him about getting some support, but he'd always insisted he was fine. One night, around 2 in the morning, he got up to use the bathroom. He lost his balance in the hallway and went down hard. He couldn't get back up. And here's the part that still haunts me. He laid there on that hallway floor for 7 hours before anyone knew. It was only because his neighbor happened to call around 9 in the morning to ask him a question. And when he didn't answer, she got worried enough to use her spare key and check on him. When I started caring for Robert after he got out of the hospital, he finally opened up to me about what those 7 hours were like. He said something I've never forgotten. The scariest part of living alone isn't being alone. It's knowing that if something happens, no one will know. That's the emergency gap, that terrifying window between when something goes wrong and when someone finally notices. And it's not just about falls. I can't count how many times I've arrived at someone's home to find medications mixed up, pills that were supposed to be taken in the morning sitting there untouched at dinner time, doses that got doubled because they forgot they'd already taken them. Prescription bottles that should have been refilled 2 weeks ago. When you're managing multiple medications alone, without anyone to double check, mistakes happen. And some of those mistakes have serious consequences. But here's the thing that might be hardest for families to understand. Even when seniors are struggling, they often don't say anything. I call this the shame barrier, and it's real. They'd rather struggle silently than risk losing the independence they have left. I hear this all the time when families aren't in the room. After their kids leave on Sunday evening, after everyone's said goodbye and the house is quiet again, that's when they'll tell me the truth. They'll say things like, I didn't want to worry them, or they have their own lives. I don't want to be a burden. And I think to myself, but they should be worried. They need to know what's really happening. But the fear of losing independence is so powerful that it keeps people from being honest about what they need. There's also the fear of confirming everyone's worst worries. If you admit you're having trouble managing your medications, or that you're scared of falling in the shower, or that the loneliness is getting to you, it feels like you're proving that you can't live alone anymore. So you hide it, you minimize it, you tell everyone you're doing great even when you're not. I've sat with seniors who were genuinely struggling and watched them put on a completely different face when their family arrived for a visit. The exhaustion disappears, the worry gets tucked away. They become the version of themselves their family expects to see. And the family leaves thinking everything is fine, while the senior goes back to struggling the moment the door closes. This isn't anyone's fault. The seniors aren't being dishonest out of malice. They're protecting themselves and trying not to burden the people they love. And the families aren't neglectful. They're trusting what they're being told and doing the best they can from a distance. But the gap between what's really happening and what's being communicated can become dangerous. If you're watching this and you recognize these patterns, either in yourself or in someone you love, I want you to know that acknowledging the struggle isn't giving up. It's the opposite. It's taking control before a crisis forces the conversation. And there are ways to bridge this gap that protect both safety and independence. Let me show you what I've seen work, and if this is resonating with you, comment the number 3 below to let me know you're here. Now, let me tell you about someone who got this right. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Dorothy. She's 74 and lives alone, and she's one of the people I think about when I need to remind myself that living alone can absolutely work. Dorothy's husband passed away about 6 years ago. Her kids live in different states. But she's thriving. And the difference between Dorothy and the people I've told you about who struggled? Dorothy built systems before she needed them. Every morning at 8:30, her daughter calls, not "How are you?" once a week, a daily call at the same time. If Dorothy doesn't answer, her daughter knows something's wrong. Dorothy also has a medical alert device that she actually wears, not sitting in a drawer somewhere. She wears it in the shower, wears it to bed, wears it when she's working in her garden. And her next-door neighbor has a spare key and checks in a few times a week just to say hello. Dorothy's independence is protected by the safety net she built before she needed it. That's the key. She didn't wait until after a crisis to put these things in place. She looked at the risks honestly and decided to address them while she still had the strength and clarity to choose what her support would look like. So let me share what I've seen actually work. First, the check-in system. It needs to be daily and consistent, not a weekly phone call where everyone asks, "How are you doing?" and accepts "fine" as an answer. It needs to be something where silence gets noticed. Some families do a morning text. Some do a video call at the same time every day. The point is regularity. When someone doesn't show up for that daily touch point, you know immediately that something might be wrong. Home modifications make a huge difference, but I've watched 80-year-olds resist grab bars because installing them felt like giving up. Then I've watched those same people use those bars to stay in their homes 3 more years. A grab bar in the shower isn't admitting defeat. It's choosing safety, better lighting in hallways, removing area rugs that can catch your feet, clear pathways from room to room. These aren't changes that make your home feel institutional. They're changes that let you keep living in your home. Here's something else I've learned. There's a difference between independence and isolation. Independence means you can make your own choices and live your life on your terms. Isolation means you're disconnected from support and community. You can be independent and still have people checking on you. You can be independent and still ask for help when you need it. The two aren't opposites. If you're watching this and you need to have a conversation with family about getting more support, try starting with this. I want to make sure I can stay here as long as possible. What would help with that? Frame it as protecting your independence, not giving it up. Because that's what these systems actually do. They give you more time in the place you love, living the life you want. And if you're a family member watching, the conversation doesn't have to be confrontational. You're not trying to take control. You're trying to build a safety net together. Ask what would make them feel safer. Offer specific help rather than vague, "Let me know if you need anything." Be concrete. Can I set up a daily check-in call? Would you be open to getting a medical alert device? Can we add some grab bars in the bathroom together? Now, I do need to address when living alone stops being the safest choice. It's when the effort to maintain independence becomes more dangerous than admitting you need more support. When falls are happening frequently, when medications are getting seriously confused despite systems being in place, when basic self-care is becoming nearly impossible, that's when the conversation needs to shift. But most people aren't there yet. Most people just need better systems while they're still able to implement them. The good news is this: you have more control over this than you think. These aren't complicated or expensive changes. They're mostly about awareness and planning, about being honest instead of hiding struggles, about building support before crisis forces it. Before we finish, I want to tell you why I share these truths with you. I've held too many hands at the end and heard too many regrets. I've sat with too many families who said, "I wish someone had warned us." And I think about all the conversations that could have happened earlier, all the systems that could have been put in place before crisis forced them, all the time that got lost because no one knew what to watch for. That's why I make these videos, not to scare you, not to take away hope, but to give you the awareness that I wish I could give every family I've worked with. Because living alone can be beautiful and safe. I've seen it work, but it requires honesty instead of avoidance. It requires planning before you're in crisis. It requires looking at the risks clearly and deciding to address them while you still have the strength to choose what your support looks like. If you're watching this as someone who lives alone, I want you to hear this. You know your own body. That awareness you have of changes happening, the things you've been noticing but maybe haven't mentioned to anyone, that's not paranoia, that's wisdom. Your body deserves to be taken seriously. Your concerns deserve to be honored. And you have more control over this than you might think. The changes you're experiencing don't mean you've failed. They don't mean you can't live independently anymore. They mean your needs are shifting, and acknowledging that shift is actually how you protect your independence. Building support systems isn't giving up. It's taking charge of your future before circumstances take charge for you. And if you're watching this as a family member, I want to say something to you too. The guilt you're carrying about not being there enough, not doing enough, not noticing soon enough, that guilt isn't helping anyone. But the awareness you're building right now, by watching this, by trying to understand what to look for, that absolutely will help. The fact that you're here, trying to learn, trying to understand, that tells me everything I need to know about how much you care. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to solve everything. You just have to be willing to have honest conversations, to ask real questions, to listen when the answers are hard to hear, to help build systems together instead of waiting until something forces the issue. Here's what I need both of you to understand. Independence and support aren't opposites. They work together. The seniors I've worked with who stayed in their homes longest, who maintained their quality of life deepest into their later years, weren't the ones who refused all help. They were the ones who built the right kind of support early enough that it protected their independence instead of threatening it. I've spent 15 years in this field because I believe the later years of life can be meaningful and safe, but only when we approach them with honesty instead of avoidance. Only when we're willing to acknowledge what's changing and respond to it with intention. Only when we stop pretending everything is fine when it isn't and start building the support we need while we're still strong enough to choose what it looks like. You're not alone in this. Whether you're the person living alone or the person worried about someone you love, you're not the first to navigate these questions. And the patterns I've shared with you today, they're meant to help you see what's happening more clearly so you can make different choices while there's still time. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Build your support while you still have the clarity and strength to decide what that looks like. And remember, asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I'll see you in the next one.